Hello, class. This is week 3 of lifespan development. I hope you all are doing well. We're going to be talking about early childhood and then in chapter 7, and then we're going to be going on to chapter 8. I apologize you don't see my face. Maybe that's not sad for you or not. You should be hearing my voice though. I hope not to bore you too much or to feel like I'm reading the PowerPoints to you. I am going to kind of skip over some things in chapter 8 and focus on the whole gender identity section. And again, just trying to kind of go over things. It's really up to you to be reading your textbook and to be understanding these things at a deeper level. So moving right along, in early childhood, we discussed this already. A lot happens in a very brief amount of time. When you look at infancy to probably even being a toddler, there's a lot of changes in weight, height, skills, abilities. Even in the few first months of being born, a child does a lot of different things like being able to coo and being able to try to grab at things that they see above their face, or recognizing a person, or responding when they see something that's scary. But their motor skills take big leaps and gains. If you look from not even being able to move and only laying on your back or your stomach to the point of you could literally die if you're laying on your face, right? And not being able to control that, to 10 months from there being able to walk. That's a huge stride, right? That's a major difference. So there's a lot happening in regards to growth and motor development in those early stages. This is just showing the basics of motor development, what should be happening between 18 to 24 months, 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and 5 to 6 years. And now every kid's a little different. And so if your child isn't doing this doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. But sometimes when kids aren't doing these things, that is a sign that there is a problem. And so this might be, if by 24 months a child isn't walking, we might say that there is a problem. Or there could be something wrong with the structure of their legs or muscle development, or doesn't necessarily mean any sort of mental delay. It could mean a physical issue, right? And so these are things that doctors look at. If like I, for example, have Kaiser insurance, they give you a survey every time you go for your well baby checkup, and they ask you a series of questions, and a lot of these questions are alluding to some of these motor development changes. Again, early training can accelerate the rate at which children learn school-related fine motor skills. Older children benefit more from training than younger children do, right? Trying to make a child do something that it's just beyond their capability at a young age isn't necessarily going to be helpful. And again, they're saying learning to write letters aids in understanding, because there's the whole the pencil to paper kind of concept of trying to understand the concept of an A. I see the A, I can sound out the A, I know what an A looks like, and that would be helpful with reading, right, or writing. I noticed even with speech, with my first son, he was, granted he's terribly vocal now, but when he was little, he was the only child I had. And so, we would talk to him and whatnot, but he was having a harder time with his speech. And a lot of it was because we needed to actually teach him how to speak. And sometimes, for me as a parent even, I didn't quite understand that. I needed to teach him how to speak. And so I started doing that, and we saw him grow in leaps and bounds. So this is changes in drawing, right? It's kind of funny. But as they get older, you could see that they get more exact and more correct in how they attempt to draw. So this is the nervous system. You got the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Different sides of the brains do different things. And one thing I found that was interesting in this section is that genes can dictate the functions and how things are lateralized in the brain function, which is so interesting. And you probably see those things in different people, how they're wired and what they're able to do based on their strengths or growing areas. Myelinization is the sheath that protects the neurons in the nervous system. And it's found in the hippocampus. There's a movie actually, and it's called Lorenzo's Oil. It's an old movie. I think Susan Sarandon's in it. But anyways, it's about a little boy who had his myelin sheaths, I think they were deteriorating or something. And so it was affecting his nervous system. And they found out that drinking olive oil helped regenerate, I think it was the myelin sheaths. I'm sure there was more to it than just that, but it was a very interesting movie. Right or left, not right or wrong, right? So 83% of the population is right-handed, 14% is left-handed, and 3% is ambidextrous. Back in the day, they wanted everyone to be right-handed, right? So they would make kids not be left-handed, or it wasn't looked as being a good thing, I guess, if you were left-handed. My eldest son is left-handed, and it's so interesting when they talk about the genetic component with this. My husband comes from a large family. There was 2 other little cousins that were born around the same time as him, and all 3 of them are left-handed. And it's just so crazy that that all 3 of them are. And it's not very common in the family. There's only 1 other left-handed person. And so it was just kind of interesting that then 3 of them are left-handed. And my son was left-handed naturally. Throws a ball left-handed, kicks a ball left-footed. He's a true lefty. He eats with his left hand. And I have 1 uncle that was left-handed too. Myself or my husband both are not left-handed. So it's kind of interesting even trying to teach him to tie his shoes and things. You have to do everything different. And you sometimes don't even consider, like, why is this so hard for you? And then you realize, oh yeah, it's because your dominant hand's the opposite hand, and how you would do it is different than how I would do it, and that whole thing. So it's just kind of interesting. This is talking about sleep and how important sleep is, right? They think kids should have 8 to 10 hours of sleep, right? And then trying to figure out how to structure it. And some kids are difficult in going to sleep. You know, there's that infant book called Baby Wise where you're like really strict on this is when your kid sleeps and you train them to sleep. And I think there is some truth on you train your child to sleep, but some kids are really hard. Again, going back to my poor eldest son, he was a terrible napper. He gave us a problem every time we put him down for a nap. I have bite marks all in my crib. My nice brand new crib that I got. He was the first one to use it, and he put bite marks all in it because he'd be so mad when I'd put him down for a nap. But my other ones sleep better. But we tried to put them on a schedule, and my kids, no matter what, for the most part, go to bed at 8 p.m. And sleep until basically 6 a.m. So it's important for kids. I think it helps with their health and with sickness and combating all those things that they can get a regular sleep and waking schedule. So it says here, preschoolers often eat less than when babies, may not consume the majority of their daily calories at mealtime. So we know kids snack a lot too. So some kids might have food aversions in regards to texture. They don't want to try new things. They only want to eat what they want to eat. This is when you have the battle of wills, or them trying to show that they have some authority in the family. And this can make dinner time or meal time not the most pleasant time of your life. You know, every kid's different with what they're willing to do and not willing to do, and then how you decide to do that. You know, you got some of those families who decide you can't leave the table till you eat your vegetables. Well, and then you have other families that are like, well, if you don't feel like eating that, you know, we aren't going to make you, but then you're just done. So everyone's different with how they manage that. But those are things that you might combat as your kids get older. 4 to 6 bouts of brief sickness are typical, especially when kids are entering daycare for the first time. When kids enter daycare, there's a more likeliness of them to get sick because they're around new germs, or even school for the first time. Kids that are under more stress may get more sick. 25% of U.S. children under 5 have one accident in any single year requiring medical attention. Most are occurring at home. Major cause of death in preschoolers, and more common among boys. Now, my kids are when I look at a lot of little girls, not saying all little girls are like this, but when I look at a lot of little girls, they're not getting into cupboards and trying to eat things and step on bugs and jump off. I think I walked in one of my living room the other day, and my 2-year-old's jumping off my end table onto the couch, and he thinks it's hysterical. Or his brothers pulled him off the couch the other day and he landed on my hardwood floor. So there's things that happen. He's gotten into those pods, you know, those little Tide Pods. which are not good for kids and they're not meant to eat, but they're, they're in places sometimes that are accessible. I have my little dishwasher ones underneath my kitchen sink, and he's gotten in there a couple times and tried to eat them. Um, and that's a common accident. They say also another common accident for kids is that liquid nicotine that you use in those e-cigarettes that kids drink that stuff, and it's poisonous. And so I think sometimes with boys it means it's more common just because they have more curiosity, right? So moving right along, child abuse is a physical or psychological injury resulting from an adult's intentional exposure of a child to potential harmful stimuli, sexual acts, or neglect. And unfortunately, this is something that we see. It's responsible for 10% of emergency room visits. Between 1 and 5% of children suffer physical abuse, and 2,000 infants and children die each year as a result of child abuse, which that's terrible, right? Very, very upsetting. Now, if you plan on going into any sort of teaching field, pastoral care field, counseling field, social work, anything like it, you'll become a mandated reporter, and you're required by law to report any sort of harm to self, others, elder abuse, and child abuse. You are forced to report those things. So, anyways, you will have to look out for that stuff. Now, as a citizen, you're more than welcome to report anything that you see. Sometimes you just won't have a lot of information to report on somebody, but you're allowed to report on anything you may see. There's social, cultural factors, right? Personal or cultural values, and sometimes that has to do with physical abuse, right? Like what's allowed in one culture wouldn't be allowed here. Cultural traditions that view children as property, right? Children are meant to be seen, not heard. And then there's communities that support those kinds of beliefs, and so it makes it difficult when trying to change a behavior or proving that the behavior is not okay. Characteristics of a child that's abused: physical or mental disabilities, difficult temperament or age. Sometimes you'll see maturity or stunting in an age that could be a problem. There's sexual abuse. There sometimes will be overt sexual behavior that's wrong, or you can notice it in their drawings, things of that nature. You can sense that there is a problem. Characteristics of abuser: depressed, lacking in parenting skills and knowledge, history of abuse themselves, substance abuser, live-in male partners. So now it sounds very stereotypical, but if there's a rotation of like probably boyfriends or girlfriends or people in and out of the home, there's more opportunity for someone to hurt a child. Poverty, unemployment, interparental conflicts. That's where you see, unfortunately, some of those terrible murder, homicide, suicide things where like one of the people is very upset and decides he's going to kill everybody and kills his wife and kills the kids and kills himself. But some of these things could be factors in child abuse. And domestic violence can be child abuse if a child is witnessing it. Okay, and so that is something to remember as you come across people, and that's even a woman beating up on a man. Those things happen nowadays, and you have to be, especially if you plan on being a mandated reporter, we don't just report men abusing women, we report women abusing men. So it's a true, real issue in our society today. So PTSD is a common problem. Kids can get PTSD, obviously, especially if they've been in a traumatic situation. All they've known is potentially that situation, then they get pulled out of it. And then they need to catch up and emotionally regulate from everything that's been taking place. Preventing abuse begins with education, and I believe knowledge is power. So tell parents about the consequences of child abuse, parenting classes, identify families at risk, protect children from further injury. I think even if your family doesn't fall in this category, I think it's super important that you educate your children on what's a safe person and what's not a safe person, because someone could abuse your child and it's outside of your own home, right? It could be another family member. It could be someone that they've run into, or someone that is bothering them and is hurt, like somehow it's at daycare or whatever, that you tell your kids what's okay and what's not okay, and that they know that they can talk to you and that you're a safe person to talk to. So gender development, there's different stages. There's gender identity, gender stability, and gender consistency, right? So here's a picture. What is this 5-year-old conveying about her understanding of gender? This is how I will look when I grow up. Well, I would see that it looks like they're in some sort of dress with a belt and a purse, and there's a rainbow. So I would assume it's a feminine drawing. So this is the gender schema theory. Development of gender schema underlies gender development and occurs with recognition of gender differences, schema organization, and first primitive gender schema and assimilation. So gender stereotypes of men and gender stereotypes of women, right? Boys, men, they tend to say boys like the color blue, boys like to play with trucks and be rough and tumble and guns and are more aggressive and things like that. And whereas girls tend to be more, maternal. I'm saying stereotypes. Maternal, like they're dolls, like to play a house, tend to be more calm, like the color pink, things of that nature. Now, that's not necessarily true, but those are some of our stereotypes, right? Sex-type behavior develops earlier than ideas about gender, is learned from older same-sex children, is learned differently by gender. So you could have a family, which let's say is predominantly girls. Then you end up having a son. He's going to learn some things that could be different than what he would learn maybe if he was in a house with all males, just because he has older sisters, right? That's going to affect that person. And so, they could observe some things and then start dressing up or having fun doing those things because they see their sister doing it. Now, they also could see those things and hate those things and want to do the exact opposite, like hit their doll or whatever, stomp on their dresses. It just really depends on the child and how it's nature versus nurture, right? That's all going on with this too. So securely attached preschoolers exhibit fewer behavior problems. Insecurely attached children display more anger and aggression at daycare and preschool. By age 4, children form goal-corrected partnerships. So meaning when the kids have more of a secure attachment, they tend to behave better because they can trust. They have more level of trust and foundation, whereas if you don't have a good securely attached foundation, there can be more anger and aggression and frustration, right? Going back to gender though, with nature and nurture, we're given a gender at birth, right, by biology. And then our biology allows us some things, right? Our biology will create us to do some things. Now, if you have little children and they're in a room and there's certain toys, it's interesting. They will gravitate to a toy that is more gender specific. However, there's certain things that become, like my kids will ask me, Mommy, is that a girl toy? And I'll say, well, yeah, girls play with that toy. They wouldn't necessarily know that unless I told them that. Because everyone in my house is boys. And so it's just kind of interesting, like how parents, I think, nurture their children really helps them to identify too with the gender that they identify with. And so in our society now, this is such a big topic because we have children at a very young age identifying potentially with a different gender than their biology, and it's creating a lot of different topics to talk about, right? And so you may see some of these things depending on what you plan on doing with your career come through your door, and then trying to figure out how to process that and what to do. So it is all very interesting and a very hot topic, right? Especially in California. Attachment, if you plan on going ahead to the master's program in counseling psychology, there's a great book. It's called Becoming Attached, and it's by Bowlby. And he did a lot of research on attachment, and it's very interesting seeing how attachment affects children and then it affects how they are as adults. There's huge correlations with attachment and how important it is. So this is just some information for you guys for this week. Keep up your hard work. I know there's a lot going on with tests and live lectures and papers and all these things, so keep up your hard work. We're almost halfway there. Have a good rest of your week. Thank you.